Okay, so the headline of your 2025 Global Intelligent Delusion study, if that's, I think that's the correct title, is that the AI grace period is over. So, what has changed in boardrooms that's driving the demand for ROI in, shall we say, months rather than what maybe once upon a time was years? What's the change?
Well, what we're seeing now is there are three things that kind of triangulate this question. One is again, if you listen to folks like Gartner or any analyst, the projected spend for AI related software is over 270 billion in 2026. So that tells the story right there. Yet you have the recent research MIT did that found that 95% of organizations that did some kind of pilot had a failure rate, so 95% failure rate. But the big one that we're seeing now is over half of investors are expecting an ROI in AI software investments in less than 6 months. And part of that is driven by I don't want to say ignorance because obviously they're very smart people, but there is. I think we even as a consumer that uses an LLM, we all have this underlying expectation. If we're using AI stuff, things should go a lot quicker. So that same mindset has been passed on to the enterprise and to the investor who's saying, well, if you're investing 270 billion around the world, we need to see our money come back to us a little sooner than just 3 or 5 years.
But I think from your comment there, you're suggesting that that expectation is at least somewhat unrealistic. Is that right?
It's very unrealistic. There's still a pretty significant gap between what people think is an AI adoption strategy and what it is. Like right now we're still dealing with what I call pilot purgatory. All these pilots that have been done that have essentially died and have never made it to market or made it beyond that. And I still believe organizations are figuring this thing out. They haven't really solved it to give the investors that kind of assurance.
Yeah, although the research shows, I think that, well, you put it as 0% of organizations are uninvolved in AI. So I suppose if you flip it the other way, it suggests that 100% are involved in AI.
Yeah. Yeah.
But is it fair to say that AI is now a sort of baseline expectation for competitiveness rather than maybe what it was once viewed as more of a strategic differentiator?
Yeah, I think it is. If you look at the universal involvement is now like table stakes in terms of AI. Competitive gap is now opening between that 16% who have scaled AI enterprise wide, which I cynically think, what's enterprise wide?
Mhm.
And then and then everybody else who are still dealing with disconnected pilots. So yes, it's becoming mainstream. It is a baseline expectation, but again, that gap is fairly wide.
Yeah, and another potential gap or at least difference between what people are expecting and what actually happens is I think about a third of the people surveyed, the leaders say that AI projects are taking longer than they anticipated. So in those cases, do you have some idea of where or how the organizations are misjudging the complexity of the project? Whether it's the technology bit, the integration, just the
Yeah.
cultural change, just what's going on? Why are so many projects, going on longer than they're anticipated?
We do. We have a strong view on this. I mean, I think that technology is rarely the bottleneck. There's not to say there aren't issues with tech, of course. But we're finding and still find, and after nearly 2 decades of being in business, that it's the mindset more than it is the mechanics. And, for example, Andrew Ng, who's the co-founder of Coursera, and he's at Stanford and considered one of the thought leaders in AI. Not word for word, but in a long interview, he was quoted last year as saying, and AI is not even about coding. It's about product management. It's about being able to frame problems correctly or being able to see through the strategic outcome of why you're building something versus just, hey, I can build it now and just go do it. So I do think the misjudging of complexity comes from a still real situation of unpreparedness in terms of organizational mindset, culture, uh, governance, how we're going to deliver it inside the company. I don't believe corporate organizations have caught up with the fact that just because AI is fast, the company necessarily isn't. And that's the complexity, is how do you bring those two together?
And is that situation you describe also responsible for, I think, just over half of your respondents say that the expectations around AI growing faster than the ability to deliver on it? Is that, I suspect from what you just said there, it's not necessarily a capability gap, but maybe government's issue or just overhyped. It's just people's expectations unrealistic, and that's the major issue.
Yeah, it's all three of those in sequence. Overhyped ambition created the expectation gap. Poor governance turned it into a delivery failure. I think we had some stats that the fact that only 29% of executives can measure AI ROI confidently means that most companies can't even tell when they've reached something or closed it. So they are all three of those are in sequence for sure.
And in terms of the delivery aspect, again, I think it was over half of respondents say
Mhm.
they just can't meet AI goals without the necessary talent capable when it comes to, I think what you referenced earlier, problem framing, outcome design.
Yeah.
So what skills are there, specific job titles, or because AI is new, is that they still to be created? And what are the skills that enterprises are missing right now in order to help deliver the AI promise?
Yeah, and I guess I almost answered this earlier, but I guess it's similar to technology is rarely the bottleneck. I would say this one is not necessarily technical skills. It really is that a shortage of people who can frame business problems. Oh, here's something that's interesting, and I don't know if you've seen this, but there's a new term floating around to describe the future role. It's called the builder. And in AI circles, and this is stemming from Anthropic and other companies who some of their more senior people have been sharing this in the media. The builder is this future role of a person, let's say like me, who's not a coder by vocation, but with vibe coding technology and all the cool things now, I can learn how to be a coder. But then there are coders who really don't understand product management, but they can now go learn and get these skills acquired using AI tools. And so we have a new role emerging in the future, I believe, called the builder, where you'll have these two capabilities collapsed into a single role. And that's going to create quite an interesting situation, I believe, in enterprise companies who typically employ both. Now they may have to employ less.
And so, in terms of the reason AI hasn't lived up to expectations, it would appear to be poor execution. Is that how you summarize that? That's the main reason why the projects just aren't delivering what was expected in the right sort of time frame?
I don't know that it's poor execution because I've seen quite a few implementations of different use cases that have gone well. I think it's more that it's unrealistic assumptions. Expectations were set by these pilots or demos. But production, when you go into production, as you know, it requires clean data, it requires a redesigned process or processes, genuine organizational change that, no vendor pitch is necessarily going to tell anybody, hey, you're going to have to re-architect your whole your whole organization. And then what happens is people are standing there thinking, oh yeah, we have to move people around. We don't have this process set up. So I do believe it's being driven mostly by unrealistic assumptions, uh, not just poor execution, although arguably there's some of that.
And in terms of the potential for AI, at the moment, are people viewing it as a cost center, whereas eventually it needs to be viewed more as a revenue engine? And is it possible, or how, if it is possible, which I presume it is, how does one measure the AI contribution margin in terms of, what it's actually delivering to the business? Hopefully, as I say, revenue rather than cost. Just your thoughts, I suppose, as to that
Yeah,
scenario.
Well, first of all, we have an AI ROI scorecard that we use across we measure it across 5 dimensions. But rather than get into that, I think at a high level, I would say there are really three attributes, to this. One is definitely cost reduction. So, what are the savings that can be reported, for example, in the supply chain or finance, and are they great savings? Are they plus, 20% or more? Revenue protection is another key metric that has to be looked at. Quality improvements that reduce work, defects, churn, that kind of thing. And then revenue generation. How is AI enable capabilities opening up new commercial opportunities for my business? Um, those three, I'd say, are maybe headlines of an underlying set of scorecard metrics that you'd need to look at to really understand if the margin contribution is actually making sense, or is it just another expenditure and we haven't figured out how to do that yet?
And in looking ahead, the survey shows that I think over three-quarters are expecting new AI solutions to drive business value over the next year or so. Uh, any thoughts as to what will separate the organizations that, shall we say, succeed with that, as opposed to those that might be in the large amount of folks that are still being underwhelmed, shall we say, by what AI is delivering for their business?
Sure, and I think the differentiators here are largely all organizational. So C-suite alignment with the CFO and COO of the business, a centralized AI studio model, some level of, pre-deployment measurement, like we said, like the beginning and end of a scorecard. Agents in production would be something else, that you would need to see, which we have some data on. That's a growing thing. And then human capability investment. So here's this last one's important because we still keep emphasizing that while some AI solutions can take over menial tasks, some of the more senior level opportunities or roles or knowledge in the business can't necessarily be replaced. And in both cases, you want to still look at how you retrain people inside the business, not just make the assumption they have to be released. I do think that many people will be released because of certain factors that are out of everyone's control. But human capability is one of these things that we're not talking about as much when we talk about AI, unless we're talking about firing people. And that's the wrong side of the coin. We should be talking about, getting them up to speed. As Peter Drucker said, there's this thing called the knowledge worker. And that's the knowledge you and I have about our business, that intrinsic knowledge that if we were to leave, that's not living in some database, that's in our minds. How do you actually get that out of people's heads? You have to invest in them and make sure you capture it.
And maybe when AI started, companies, boards were quite happy to throw, I won't say unlimited, but fairly open-ended funding at it. But I suspect that's not the case now for the reasons we discussed, maybe. So how would you say organizations can balance commercial discipline, i.e. not spending too much, but you still need that experimentation, which is potentially open, because you don't know where you're going to get to. So how do you balance those two possibly, conflicting priorities?
Well, many years ago, when we became known for our expertise in product management, and people would ask, "Well, what is product management?" Or more importantly, what is Gartner's phrase "project to product," which they talk about? It was the idea of removing silos and bringing people across the company together to work on products, not just the teams underneath that work on individual projects. So the whole product thing, which is a big deal, is how do I get people from all areas of the business working together for a single outcome? And I think on the AI topic, the necessary steps would be to apply the same thinking. And the way we're seeing that now is, I mentioned, for example, vibe coding earlier. Vibe coding is now something that any subject matter expert in the business can do. They don't have to be a coder. So if you now bring those SMEs in the business together with the technology teams, and for example, they vibe code a proof of concept and they're bought into it and they're collaborating, I believe you're going to have much higher rates of success and buy-in, especially from the CFO who needs to fund it, than if they do it the traditional way, which is they give it over to IT, go play with it and bring it back, and I'll let you know if I like it.
And maybe just in finishing, your own organization, what is it that you are bringing to the AI party? Yeah, how are you helping folks to address some of the issues that we've been discussing?
Well, what we bring to the party, I guess, is two things. One is we're very keen on helping companies figure out their AI adoption strategy, meaning looking at the investments they've already made or are thinking of making, and helping them understand how to take the right set of steps without overspending. So we can give them insights and guidance on maybe the right use cases they should be considering or prioritizing. And then the second thing we can do, if they want us to do, is we can build those use cases because we have that capability. But the reason we distinctly divide the two is because we believe that missing upfront step to really understand an adoption strategy is still a real problem in the market with AI. And in both cases, we apply our product management expertise, which helps just take a step back, slow down to go faster, frame the problem correctly.
And in terms of what you find, I mean, do you ever bump into a situation that is, dare I say, so horrendous that you basically tell them sort of scrap the project and start from scratch? Or do you always find components that can be built on, if you like, so the work that has been done to date isn't completely wasted? Or just, is there a typical customer in terms of where they're at with AI and how you can help them?
Yeah, we haven't seen the first situation. What we see, if I was to say typical, a typical client is overspending on LLM licenses. So that would be one thing. Hasn't figured out how to really adopt it across the business well, and maybe has a set of use cases that they're already testing. But what they haven't done, the typical client, what they haven't done is they haven't really adopted an AI ROI scorecard to really know how to measure its working. They still haven't invested in the skill set for their people to not just train them on the use of AI, but have that product mindset. I would say those are the typical scenarios that we come across. Some initial investment, some progress, but they really haven't taken the leap.
And in terms of the champions of AI in organizations, does that vary? I mean, do you find the IT departments often driving it, which I think you're suggesting is perhaps not the right way, as opposed to as someone in the board saying this is, crucial for our business and therefore everybody needs to work together? Just, yeah, what kind of job roles and responsibilities do you bump into when it comes to AI being used within your customers?
Well, the ones that are doing it well, they really bought into the whole mindset of we have to democratize digital. So what you see now are board members who are very heavily involved in the budgets that are being assigned to digital technology like AI, versus just trusting the team to go do it. So we're fine, and that's not a command and control problem. That's just, hey, we want to know how we're going to implement this stuff and how it's going to change our life and our business. Those companies where we see that kind of involvement from board members to C-suite to middle management and the brainstorming, that's where it's working well. They're still spending, they still have needs for the other things I mentioned, but some of them are really pausing to do things in baby steps, not just go all in. I think the fear is they're gonna, like, let's take LLMs, right? When I said licensing, you have consumption models, and you have usage models, of course, and then you have standard licenses that you buy. But both are very expensive for companies if they don't really understand how to leverage them. And it's taking that pause to even learn how to leverage what I bought that's causing some of the anxiety. But the ones that are doing that are actually doing quite well.
And maybe finally, AI is talked about so much everywhere, every industry sector. Do you think there's a danger that companies convince themselves that all their competitors are doing it, and therefore, if they haven't got a decent strategy, they're in danger of getting left behind and even worse? Or is the reality that despite all this talk, most companies haven't really got to grips with AI beyond, some chat GPT and maybe something a little bit more than that, and therefore it is still a fairly level playing field. What are your thoughts?
I think it's the former that you said, and this includes us. We're all living with the fear that we're last at the table, right? So we all have this FOMO and anxiety that we're not using the latest thing. We can't compete. We'll never be fast enough. And even us who are experts in the field, we struggle with that internally. We talk about it as well. Is the tool stack the latest? Do we really know that we've got the right solution here? So I think it's the former. I think there's a very heavy feeling of anxiety in the business world around keeping up. It's not even FOMO. It's just that it's not missing out. It's even more than that. It's can I even compete?
Okay, but are you optimistic overall that AI will deliver on the promise that's being talked about as and when people, as you've explained, begin to understand the human element and the culture change that maybe is the important starting point before the technology gets implemented? Or do you worry that we will, if we talked in another 12 months, your survey would still have a depressingly large amount of people saying that AI still isn't delivering on their expectations?
I think it's going to be that. I think some things will improve, but like all emerging technologies, they arrive a lot faster and they go a lot quicker than the ability of people to keep up. So how those two converge, I don't think it's as simple as in the next 12 months. So we'll see. It's obvious to say we'll see improvements and we'll see areas where we can point to and go, "Oh, yes, a year ago that was a problem, but now it's been solved." But on the larger scale, I do think there's still a long road ahead for companies to be able to stand up to their boards or do their quarterly earning reports and say, AI or some form of AI has done X for our business, and here's the metrics and the measures. There'll be some, but I don't think it'll be the masses in a year.
And I keep saying finally, but this promise, the final one. Uh, do you also think at the moment everyone seems to be talking more about the large language models? But there's another, I say, call it world of pain, but there's another lesson to be
Yeah.
learned when the inferencing comes, because that's a different type of AI with different, potentially more exciting opportunities, but obviously risks and complications along the way. So just your thoughts, I suppose, as to where we are on the journey between the LLMs and the
Yeah.
inferencing.
No, you're right. I think m most people today still are referring to Gen AI when they talk about AI. They're referring to LLM usage. That's what most people talk about. But the next thing around agentic AI is coming up quickly, where it won't be just LLMs. But then there's this whole other set of things that nobody talks, well, some talk about it, but we're obviously not talking about it, which it proves your point. What about AI and doing predictive maintenance analytics for large machinery? What about AI for, automating workflows in oil and energy? There's so many other use cases where AI is being used behind the scenes to use data intelligently that we don't talk about. We're always talking about, LLM usage. And so I think you're right. There's a whole other world of pain, maybe one way to describe it, as you said, but there is a huge set of opportunities there that will get addressed in the next 1 to 2 years.
Okay, it's been fantastic to chat, and thank you
Likewise.
so much for sharing some great insights into what's going on in the world of AI. Maybe not as fast as we'd like, but at least things are moving. So, Alex, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Grateful to be here.